Chapter 5. He Said, She Said. I stayed in the castle working for Miss Crowley, or Old Lady Crowley as everyone else called her. I would wake up every morning, go to breakfast with the rest of the maids, clean, then sleep. Sometimes I would get a break and the princess would tell me about her day. That was always nice. One morning, I woke up early as ever and got dressed. They made me trade my pretty green dress for a beige dress and a cap, which I never liked. I looked in the mirror. Something about today was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. You know how some people say we have a sixth sense, like you know when someone is watching you? That's what I was feeling. But I shrugged it off and got to work. Miss Crowley demanded I do the laundry, and so I did. Midday, as I brought bed sheets to one of the guest rooms, I glanced down the hall as I passed it to see Rapunzel, Eugene, and Cassandra fighting a large robot. I watched as Cassandra jammed her sword into the gears in the back, and the three of them pushed it out the window. I wanted to have helped, but I was no good in this situation. Suddenly, Eugene spotted me and said, "Hey!" He marched towards me. "Did you know about this?" I blinked. "What? Know about what? You mean the robot?" I was confused. I didn't know where it had come from. No less knew about it prior to the situation. "You're Varian's little lab buddy, aren't you?" He jabbed his finger in my face. I blinked. "What? Varian did this?" I let go of my laundry cart to smack Eugene's hand away. "I don't believe that," I stated, crossing my arms. "Oh, really?" Eugene looked at me, frustrated. Rapunzel put a hand on his shoulder. "Eugene, please. Piper couldn't have known. We found the automaton in the tunnels when he stole the sundrop." She looked at me sympathetically. "She hasn't seen Varian since just before then." I paused in shock. "Wait, so you have proof it was him?" I looked up in concern. Cassandra walked up and sighed. "No one else could have done it, unless Raps sabotaged her own party," she joked. Rapunzel gasped. "I would never!" She looked genuinely offended. I guess I looked more upset than a normal person would have, because Eugene growled, "Piper, what do you know?" I looked at him, grabbed my cart, and pushed it off. I could overhear the conversation that followed. "What is that kid up to?" Eugene said. Rapunzel sighed. "It doesn't matter. I don't believe Piper had any part in this, and we need to tell my father." I could hear them all walk off, their voices fading. I finished dressing the beds, and Mrs. Crowley let me off early for some reason. I sat in my room, unsure what else to do. I looked at my doll. "Oh, George, did Varian really attack the castle? After I made him promise not to hurt anyone?" I sighed solemnly. Later into the night, a knock came from my door. I sat up quickly, wiping my face. I hadn't been crying, but I was exhausted from the week's work, and yawning makes my eyes water. Whoever it was, I didn't want them to think I was crying. "Come in," I called out, not bothering to hide my startled tone. I watched as the door opened and Queen Arianna stepped in. My eyes widened in shock. She sat on my bed. "Hey, Piper, I heard what happened with the automaton." I panicked. I didn't have anything to do with it. I had no..." Her Highness interrupted me by chuckling. "I know, Piper. Miss Crowley has really been working you to death. There's no way you'd have the time." She chuckled softly. The best way I can describe it is a motherly laugh. Her expression changed to a curious one. "But Eugene was saying you were acting odd. Anything to add to that?" I grasped the hem of my dress, wary. "It's just... I guess I have a hard time believing Varian would want to hurt anyone." I looked at her. She knew I was lying. "Piper, we need your cooperation. The kingdom could be in danger. Please." She looked at me, her eyes saying everything. I looked away. "When I went to Old Corona, Varian visited me. He said he wouldn't hurt anyone, and I promised I wouldn't tell anyone." Her Highness frowned. "Piper, you should have told someone. We have no idea what Varian is capable of at this point, and we need to be careful." She rubbed my back comfortingly. "I didn't think he would do anything." I was so scared that the Queen would punish me, but she just simply stood and gave me a motherly smile. She kneeled down to my level. "Rapunzel said you like baking, right?" I nodded, and she took my hand. "Follow me." She guided me down the hall to her room and opened her hope chest. "This is a cookbook my father made. He filled it with the simplest to the craziest recipes. I never found myself with enough time to make them, and they never really interested Willow, but I'm sure you pulled it to good use." "Really? Your Highness, I really can't accept this," I panicked. The book was so nice, I really didn't deserve it after all the lying. She handed it to me. "If you promise that no matter what happens, you'll help us figure out what's going on with Varian, then it's all yours," she smiled. It was a bribe, and one I could hardly refuse. I wanted to accept so badly, but was I doing it for the right reasons? Was it really to help Varian, or was I scared of what would come if I didn't accept? If I accepted, would Varian think of it as a betrayal? Would I have broken my promise? No matter. As before I could make the decision, we heard screaming outside. We looked at the window to see the castle entrance was covered in smoke, and something large was moving around in it. I gasped. Could this be Varian's work? And what was Rapunzel doing down there? We watched them fight off the beast in fear when we heard a familiar voice from behind us. "Hello, ladies." We turned around to see a masked figure in a large coat who threw green dust on us and whispered, "Sleep." We then blacked out. When I woke up, I screamed. Varian's face was right in mine. "Morning," he laughed. I looked around the room in a panic. We were in our lab, a large tarp covering something in the middle of the room. From the amber that crept under it, I figured it was his father. "Varian, well, what's going on?" He laughed, following it with a snort. "You were taking a while to return, so I'd figured I'd take matters into my own hands." I looked down, expecting to be bound at the wrists, but I wasn't. "What's wrong?" He knelt to my level. I looked at my hands. My beige dress had been dragged through the dirt, and now was a dusty brown. "Varian, what makes you think this is okay?" Varian's smile turned into a disappointed frown. "Piper, you of all people should know how horrible it is to be ignored. I was ignored by the whole of Corona. No one wanted to help me with my father." He took my hands and added, "But you are the exception." I looked behind him and gasped to see the Queen asleep. "Varian, what have you done?" Varian looked at the Queen and said, "Oh, her? Don't worry about it." He pulled me to my feet. "She's bait for the real plan." He dusted my hair off. "It's all been calculated for." "Oh, and you didn't get hurt regarding the automaton attack, did you?" He turned around to write something down. "No, but someone could have," I yelled. "You lied. You broke your promise." I was so angry. He marched back towards me. "This is the only way, Piper. Have you forgotten everything my dad has done for you? I need this. Well, we need this." I blinked. He was right. Not only did Kieran care for me as his own, but Varian had cared for me. When we met, he didn't take any time to figure out who I was before immediately trying to help me. I had to return the favor. I rubbed my arm, glancing at the covered amber. Suddenly, we heard the Queen waking up. I looked at her, but Varian pushed my face back towards him. "Piper, are you with me, or are you against me?" My eyes focused on the Queen. It had felt like only 2 minutes ago I was about to betray him for a stupid book. I clenched my fist and looked him in the eye. I'm in." I heard the Queen gasp, and I looked down. She had to know I was only trying to protect myself. We all knew Varian was dangerous. At least, that's how I justified my actions in my head. In truth, I thought I was right. I thought Varian was doing what he had to do, and I thought there were no ifs or buts about it. Varian turned to the Queen, who looked very disappointed in me. I'll never forget that look. The first time my actions ever hit me in the face like that. She struggled in her robes as Varian approached his desk, re-explaining his plans. "Don't worry, Your Highness. You are merely bait to lure the princess here." He wiped away a golden powder that covered the page with an image of Rapunzel on it. "Only the magic of her unbreakable hair can shatter the amber and free my father." He looked at me, then to the Queen. "I tried asking for help in a civil manner, but was denied by everyone in Corona." Varian walked to one of the edges of the tarp. "So unfortunately, this is my only remaining recourse." He pulled the tarp, and Her Highness and I both gasped. I had never actually seen his father in the amber before this. It hurt to see the man who had tried to help me so much in this predicament. Her Highness sighed. "And after you freed your father?" she inquired. Varian laughed. "After?" his malicious smile turning into a scowl. "Oh, well, I'm afraid Corona will have to pay for turning their backs on me." Varian gave me a glance, not of reassurance, but something close to malice, almost as if he knew I didn't want to play a part in this. "And that's when you should start worrying, Your Majesty." Varian handed me tools so I could help him build something, and we got to work. He looked out the window, hearing clopping in the distance. "Any moment now, Your Highness." He laughed as we continued to build. When the machine was finished, we stashed it away. We heard the king's attack approaching, and he looked out the window once more. "What a happy family reunion this will be." He turned around to the queen. "For both of us." I rubbed my arm anxiously, and Varian looked at me. What's wrong, Piper?" I laughed. It's a bit silly compared to the whole, everything." I laughed again. "But plus, I don't want to steal your moment." I shrugged. He rolled his eyes. "Please, Rapunzel and the king will come through that trap door any moment. Before that happens, talk to me." I sighed. "I guess I miss my dad, too." He scoffed. "Psh, that goof. You barely knew him. Why would you miss him?" I shrugged. "I know. That's why I said it was silly." He put a finger on my mouth, shushing me. He pulled me into the shadows as we watched Rapunzel rise from the trapdoor. "How did you know?" I whispered. Varian pointed to his head. "All calculated for," he said cockily as the king followed Rapunzel. They approached the decoy Varian we had placed at the window. "You ready?" he whispered. "As I'll ever be," I choked. King Fredric grabbed the replica and set off the trap we had planted, trapping the king and princess in place. Varian laughed. "Welcome back, Rapunzel." We heard the automatons activate outside, and the king growled, "Varian, I demand you release us, and tell me where the queen is." Varian caged Rapunzel's lizard and scoffed. "Your Majesty, I know it's hard for you, but for the first time in your life," he slammed the cage down on his desk, "you are in no position to demand anything." I had never seen Varian like this before, but it seemed to come naturally to him. I'll be the first to admit, well, not the first. I denied it for a very long time, but I almost wanted to be Varian in this moment. He had everything he needed to get what he wanted, all eyes on him, and everything had fallen perfectly into place for him. Why could I never have that? But I digress. Varian smiled. "But in the spirit of compromise, how about I meet you halfway?" He opened the curtain to reveal the queen chained to a rock. Rapunzel cried out, "Mom!" I almost felt bad. Almost. In my mind, Rapunzel had hurt Varian, turned her back on him, threw him to the wolves, and ignored him. And after all that, he still found a way. The queen reached for Rapunzel. "I'm okay, Rapunzel." "Let her go, Varian!" Rapunzel cried. "Please." "First, you're going to do something for me," he said very matter-of-factly. The king glared at Varian. "What do you want?" Varian rolled his eyes. "Oh, so now you care about what I want," he laughed. "All it took was threatening the things you love the most." He cleared his throat. "Piper?" The king leaned forward. "What are you going to do, Varian?" I pushed our drill, which was covered by a tarp, as Varian explained. "I'll spare you the details about the sun drop darkness, blah, 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 and get to the good stuff." Varian walked towards me, and I backed up as he unveiled it. He looked at me for a moment. You could have done the honors. I wouldn't have minded." He continued towards the rocks and knocked on them. "Unbreakable?" He walked towards Rapunzel, who looked at me. I assumed she thought I was there unwillingly, but I glared at her as Varian took some of her hair. "Unbreakable." He walked back towards the drill. To put it plainly, with assistance from our drill, Rapunzel's hair should be able to shatter the amber and free my father. The king glared at Varian. What do you mean, should? Varian looked at me. I think he wanted me to explain. Looking back on it, this was probably some way of confirming I was willing to be a part of this. I picked at my sleeves. Well, it's just as likely the Emperor shatters, Her Highness. Varian pointed finger guns at me. Bingo! You were listening! He laughed. The king drew his sword and I jumped back. I was across the room from him, but I was still scared. Absolutely not, the king shouted. Rapunzel played with her hair. It's not your choice, Dad, she said. Varian leaned on the table next to the king and lowered his sword. She's right, Dad. He had a look of realization. Oh, and I almost forgot, we're kind of on a time crunch here, so I'm gonna need to speed things along. He started to pour the same formula that had encased his father on the rocks by the queen. I gasped and whispered through gritted teeth, Varian, since when did we agree? Varian interrupted me. Piper, please, this is an A-B conversation. I see your way out of it, he chuckled. I was a little offended, and I crossed my arms in frustration. Rapunzel panicked. Varian, stop! Varian smiled. Well, he freed the princess from her trap. Shall we get started? He smirked. I want to say I missed his goofy smile. I want to say I wanted to stop him, but all I could think about is how Rapunzel supposedly hurt him. Varian loaded Rapunzel's hair into the drill and pulled it towards the amber. I bit my lip anxiously. It had to work. If it didn't work, we'd hurt these people for nothing. His efforts would be fruitless, and I would be proven wrong. Rapunzel sighed. Varian, if this doesn't work and something happens to me, please, please, let my mom go. Varian looked back in anger. I can't make any promises. He put his goggles on. Princess. He started the drill, and the princess screamed as the drill pulled her hair. Flashes of light shined from her hair to the amber, each as indestructible as the other. It wasn't working. Varian growled. What? Why? He started the drill, and Rapunzel fell to the ground. It was hurting her. The king protested as Rapunzel thrived in pain on the ground. Varian stopped the machine. I don't understand. Why didn't it... He ran over to the amber. Her hair! It should have cut through it! Why didn't it work? I didn't entirely see what happened, but Rapunzel's lizard freed the king, who freed the queen, and they both ran to Rapunzel, shouting her name. They had so much remorse for her, but they didn't care for the boy who felt he had just lost his father. Varian cried out, No, no! I wasn't wrong! It's not my fault! He looked at the royal family. None of it is! It's her fault. Arian, I approached him carefully, and he pushed me to the ground. I ran after him as we approached Plan B, an automaton that could be controlled from the inside. I wish I had tried to talk him out of it, but all I did was try to join him, yet he pushed me away. He climbed into the machine, and it burst out of the ground. I turned the other way and ran back up the stairs to try and catch what would follow. I walked outside to see Varian holding the queen and Cassandra. Rapunzel threw her pan at him. Why she had a pan, I had no idea. That's enough, Varian, she growled. Varian stepped toward her, unknowingly stepping towards me as well. He hissed, It's not enough until you have endured the same amount of pain and agony I have. He crushed the queen in the hand of his machine, when suddenly rocks burst from the ground towards Rapunzel. I don't know what happened, but the rocks destroyed the robots around her and went right through Varian's. I tried to get her away, but Eugene pushed me away from her. Hands off, tiny tot, he yelled. I scrambled out of Eugene's grasp and ran towards Varian, but was startled when the rocks broke through the wall. I looked at Eugene and Rapunzel as they kissed. How could they be so happy after destroying Varian's life? I almost confronted them when I felt metal on my wrist. Wait, no, I didn't want to be a part of this, stop! I cried out as they dragged me towards the prisoner's carriage. They stopped and looked at the queen. She nodded, confirming they could arrest me. I was tossed in, and I banged on the door. No, don't take me away! Please! My cries turned into quiet sobs. please. Varian's voice came from behind me. Don't worry, Piper. We'll have our revenge on the royal family. He walked towards one of the windows. I will make my father proud. I curled into the corner, waiting for the long ride ahead. End chapter 5.